Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Last week, I got this comment on my video from Manny BTS asking if I can go over the business side of videography, including how to charge your clients. So that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. Let's roll the intro. The $1,000,000 question, how much should I charge for a video? I really wish I could sit here and just give you a straightforward answer and you could take that and then just charge that for every single one of your projects. Unfortunately, it does not work like that. This is a very complex and nuanced conversation. And for any of these points that I'm about to hit in this video, I could honestly talk about for an hour. So if you guys want a part 2, if there's any things that you were left unanswered that you still have questions about, leave them in the comments, DM me on Instagram at Saul Lopez. Would love to have a further conversation with you. Without further ado, let's dive right into it. The first thing that I want you to think about when charging a client is your experience level. You really need to know where you're at in this career path to know how much you can charge. If you're just starting out, let's say you're 5-6 months into it, you're not gonna be charging the same amount as someone who is 20, 30 years into this career. They have way more experience, they've been on bigger projects, I'm sure they have better equipment. Not to say you can't charge for videos. The first project that I ever shot back in 2017 that was paid, I got paid $150. I shot that on a Sony a7R, the Mark I, a $100 photo diox adapter, and the majority of it was shot on the nifty 50 Canon, the 50mm 1.8 lens. So that was my equipment. Your experience level. How many projects have you shot? What does your portfolio look like? Is it applicable to the project that you're getting hired to do? At the same time, let's say you're just starting out and someone that you've always wanted to shoot with, say it's an influencer, say it's an athlete, they reach out to you and they ask you to shoot for free. You need to take under consideration whether shooting for free for that person is worth it for you or if you feel like you need to be charging for your time. It's really easy to feel like this is the biggest opportunity you've ever had because maybe you've been looking up to this person in the social media space for a while and you always wanted to shoot with them. It might be worth it for you to shoot for this person for free for a couple of reasons. The first reason being, you never know where this opportunity can take you. If it's a short 30-second video for Instagram that they just want you to shoot really quickly, they might love the video. They might have a project with a bigger company with a big budget where they might bring you on. They might introduce you to a bigger network that they're already connected to who might hire you as well. So it's a very tricky situation because you don't want to burn a bridge for, a paycheck necessarily, as terrible as that sounds, because you, at the end of the day, remember, you do need to live off of this career path. You need to make money because that's the only way to survive. You need to, retire one day. But if you're 19, 20 years old, you have zero expenses, you might still live with your parents, you don't necessarily need the money. From time to time, you might have to shoot for free because this might be a portfolio piece for you. That's the first thing, just to take into consideration. I'm not saying shoot for free. I'm just saying take your experience level into consideration and how far into it you are, especially if someone is asking you to shoot for free. The second thing you need to think about is, where in the world do you live? What I do and the things that I shoot in the fashion, music, and sports industry, those opportunities aren't going to be available to someone who, let's say, lives in Idaho. No offense to Idaho, I've never been, I'm sure it's a lovely place, don't come at me. But someone shooting in a major city like Los Angeles, New York, Miami, London, Paris, Milan, those pricing rates are going to be a lot higher usually than someone who lives in the middle of nowhere. If I charge $10,000 for a project for a local company, local companies in Idaho might not have $10,000 to spend on video content because the price of living is just completely different. It just doesn't even compare to a big city like Los Angeles. Depending on where you live, you also need to take into consideration, how much companies have to spend, especially if it's a local company. But if you live in Idaho and you're getting paid by Microsoft to fly to Seattle to make a big corporate video, that's a completely different situation because you can charge hundreds of thousands of dollars, I'm sure, for projects like that. Two things to take into consideration before even thinking about a figure. What is your experience level? Is the project going to lead you to more opportunities, or it's a relationship that you really want to grow on if someone's asking you to shoot for free? Or where in the world do you live? Because those things really matter. Moving on now to the more concrete steps of how to charge a client. When it comes to companies and people who want to hire, there's a big educational component when having conversations with the client. If they're just starting to dive into video creation, content creation, hiring freelancers, hiring creatives, hiring artists, they may not know what this industry looks like and why you're charging a certain amount of money. They might think it's too expensive. So when you're going into these conversations, know that a lot of it is really, really educational, which means you need to be really well versed into why you charge how much you charge. When charging clients, you need to know the scope of work. More often than not, people are gonna reach out to you and ask you for your hourly rate or your flat project rate. I always tell them that I don't have either of those. I don't charge a standard fee because I'm not gonna charge the same thing I'm charging Netflix. I'm not gonna be charging to a local company that I'm shooting here in Los Angeles because, again, those budgets don't compare. Netflix is gonna have way, way, way more money than your local mom and pop pizza shop that you're shooting for. So you need to know the scope of work and who your client is. Some things that you need to think about: how many days is this project going to last? What's the concept? Do you need a script? What's the look they're trying to achieve? What are the deliverables? Do they need multiple edits? Is this for Instagram feed? Is this for YouTube? Is this for Instagram stories? Is this for TikTok? Right off the bat, those are 4 different ratios that you need to be shooting and editing for. What's the turnaround time? Is there travel involved? What is the pay period? Are they gonna pay you in 60 days, 90 days, 30 days, 15 days? You really need to think about your personal financial situation. Let's say you really need the money immediately, but someone is hitting you with a net 60 days. So if you need the money immediately, you might take into consideration charging less because these companies might pay you a little quicker. It's a terrible situation, and it's something that I am disappointed about in the creative industry, that, things happen like that, but that's just how some of these companies are. They don't pay out their freelancers immediately like they do their regular employees. So that's something that you're gonna face down the line as well. I know I just threw out a lot at you right now, but in the description below, I've linked a Google Sheet that has a sample budget breakdown that I use for all of my projects that I send out to my clients when sending a quote. We're gonna walk through that right now, so let's dive right into my computer. This sample project estimate is linked in the description below. It is view only. Feel free to download it and use it for any of your projects that you like. This is something that I use to make it a lot easier to charge my clients. There's a lot of things that you need to take into consideration. You can add to this sheet as well if there's things that you might want to add. You can take away if some of the project doesn't call for it. Feel free to make this your own, but we're gonna walk through this now. So starting off with planning and brand consulting. This is what I was mentioning when it comes to the educational portion of the project. The client may not know exactly what they want, and they tend to forget that a videographer and photographer means different things. For me, I personally am not creative in the sense of coming up with a concept. I work best when a client comes to me and they're like, Saul, we have this person that we're shooting at here with this setting, and we just need you to capture their interview or film some cool B-roll. Like, I need the client to be very, very specific with what they want, because my mind doesn't work in a way where it's like, oh, let's shoot this way, which is why charging for planning and brand consulting is so key, because this is really a whole different hat that you need to do. And it's honestly a job for usually a project director, a producer. This is completely different roles, but a lot of the times these clients don't get it, and they feel like, oh, he's a videographer, he comes up with everything, and that's just part of the rate. So I like to include this in my budget because that is something I hate doing. It does take up a lot of energy and mind power for me, and it's extremely important to just charge for that. So you'll see here some of the initial things that we charge for are project planning and setup. This includes kickoff calls, creating a brief, the planning and bidding, the brainstorming strategy, etc. We also have a row here for strategy. We also have a row here for concept and treatment development, coming up with the idea and developing a deck. A treatment is a deck, basically. The director prepares the creative treatment to be approved by the client, the brand and concept development, visuals, and story. So these are things that you need to think about if you're also putting this together. Writing and establishing a brand direction. Sometimes companies come to you and they're like, hey, we want a video, but we don't have any creative assets. We don't have any graphic designs. They might have their logo, but okay, what does that mean? What is the tone of their company and the the tone that they want to put out there on social media for their audience. They know their audience better than you do, so you need them to explain this to you in order for you to be able to establish a brand direction and write properly. Revisions, not for your actual deliverables. This is revisions for all of these different things. So let's say you throw a concept at them and they don't like it. All right, well, now you need to go to the drawing board and do it again, but are you charging for that time? So the revisions is a really, really key line item here that you need to charge. After you've planned everything, you've had all these meetings, you've had all these calls, you've done the brand consultation, now you need to move into pre-production. So again, this is before you've even shot anything. You haven't even hit record on your camera. This all happens before, and things that you need to be charging for. So moving on to pre-production. Depending on the client, some clients might have a huge budget and they have marketing heads, vice presidents of global marketing, etc. And you really want to be as professional as possible with them. So you might come up with a visual graphic, some designs that you want to charge for, just so that they have a very clear deck of a shot by shot list, what the set is going to look like, and that's what you charge for in this line item. And that doesn't mean that you are going to do it. You hire a graphic designer to do it. A lot of these things I don't know how to do, and I don't try to do because I could care less. I could care less about graphic design. I could care less about casting. I could care less about storyboards, illustrations, concepts. I hire out everything for this because these are not my strong suits. My strong suit is shooting. Does the shot look good? Does the framing look good? Things of that nature. So I outsource all of these things. Like I mentioned again, casting. Do you need to find models? Do you need to find actors? I'm not a casting director. I don't know what's going to work best for the client. So you might want to outsource that as well. Let's say now you have your cast, but it's like you need a specific hair and makeup look. You need a specific wardrobe. Who's going to do that for you? I'm not going to do that for you. I'm not a stylist. I don't do hair and makeup. I don't know necessarily what might look good or why not. But now you need to go find those people who. So now you hire someone, usually a producer, who can go and get you these stylists and hair and makeup artists. Storyboard design, storyboard illustrations. Again, storyboarding. That's not something I want to do. I don't want to spend time doing this, but the client might want something like that and you might be able to outsource it. So this can also be a line item. Executive producer preparation days. If you bring on a producer, I have one of my close friends who I went to college with who's a producer now. He produces a lot of my projects. I bring him on and he charges. We have, a sample rate here that you might be able to charge. So, things like this aren't cheap. Director of photography prep day. So that would be my role. I need to make sure the equipment is ready and I have a day with my first AC. Your first camera assistant. Your first camera assistant is typically the person who builds out your camera. Let's say you're shooting on a Red camera or an RE camera or whatever. You have a crazy rig. Your first camera assistant is the person who is going to be setting that up for you. And as a DP, you want to prepare with that person so you guys are on the same page when you're on set. When you're a DP as well, you want to start thinking about the framing and the lighting, and you're working with your gaffers and your key grips to know what that looks like. So you're going to have a bunch of preparation days and you need to charge for that because that is your time. That is part of the project. That is not something that is, just goes without being mentioned. Location planning. You need to visit the places that you're going to be shooting, especially if it's like a movie or let's say it's whatever. Like these are things that you need to be charging for. If you need to go out of your way, take time out of your life to go visit these places to decide whether or not a place will or will not work. There's a bunch of other things that you could add into pre-production as well. There's a bunch of things that you could take out as well, because if you're shooting for, again, your local pizza shop, they may not need all of this. So you don't want to be hitting them with a first AC prep day because it's just going to be you. So a lot of these things you could cut out, but it's always good to have more than less just because you really never know. All right, moving on now to the actual production phase. This is when you're actually on set, you're shooting. You need to think about your studio fee, where you're shooting, are they charging you to shoot there? Some studios charge hundreds of dollars an hour to thousands to millions. It really, really depends on where you're shooting. But if you're just starting out, I doubt a high level producer is watching this, but if you're just starting out, some small studios do charge you. And then it also depends on like how many people are there and like what you're doing. Transportation costs, the wear and tear on your vehicle. If you're driving to pick up equipment, etc., you need to charge for your transportation. Or if someone needs to take an Uber or a Lyft, or if you're flying someone in from another part of the country, that needs to be included. Your executive producer, if they're on set, you need to charge their day rate, your day rate, your director of photography, your if you have a second camera, a third camera operator, if your first AC, your grip, your gaffer, you know, how much are each of these people charging for their time and day. If you have a sound technician to do audio, if you're renting equipment, you need to include your rental equipment. Even if you're using your own equipment, you need to charge a rate for that because that's wear and tear in your camera. Let's say something happens to your camera on set and it gets ruined. Like, who's gonna pay for that? If you didn't include that, then that's completely out the window and you're out however much that costs. If you hired a hair and makeup artist, a stylist, a production assistant, if you know, wardrobe, how much does your costume actually cost? You know, people need to go out, buy these materials. They might need to sew them, tailor them, whatever. Catering and lunch. If you're on set for 8 days, it's expected that you feed your crew. So you need to take into consideration meals and craft services, miscellaneous expenses, anything that could go wrong. Maybe you need some extra tape. Maybe you need some hangers for a wardrobe. Maybe you need some wires, whatever. There's always a million little things that come up on set that you need to be charging for. So miscellaneous expenses is something that you could charge there. So that's your production. Moving on now to your post-production. This is when you're editing and then the final delivery of the video. You need to be thinking about your media storage, your hard drives. I don't use my hard drives for my projects because that is my personal space. You know, you need to be charging a project hard drive for the client because this is their project and you don't need to give them the hard drive. This is just because this is standard practice, just charge for the hard drives. Editing, how many videos are they editing? You know, do they need 20 videos? Do they need 14 videos? Do they need more or less? Whatever, you know, this is something that the deliverables are extremely important, something that you define up here in your planning and brand consulting, just so that you know how to properly charge this. Editing revisions, you know, how many do you want to do complimentary revisions? Do you want to charge after a certain amount? Graphics and logos, do you need to hire a graphic designer, a motion graphics artist to do all these different logos? Or are these assets that the client already has? You know, maybe they already have these for you. Do you need to hire a video effects artist, their revision rate? Sound design, you know, do you need to hire someone to compose music for this project? Coloring revisions, you know, this is your person who adds the color. You don't need to know how to color a video. I am color deficient. I can't see color properly, so I am not going to be coloring videos for my clients because sometimes they might say this is too green, but I just see it as regular green. So I hire a colorist to do all my coloring for me. Animations, animation revisions, music, voiceover artists, a million things that you need to take into consideration. And this isn't even half of it. You could go on a crazy list. You could do less, like I mentioned, but I want you to know that if you're starting out and you're seeing some of your favorite videographers do crazy projects, they don't do everything. You don't have to know how to do everything. It's always good to know a little bit from every department, but don't feel that you need to know how to style. You don't need to know how to do video effects. You can hire people. There's people who dedicate their lives to just being sound operators, camera assistants, people who have never touched a camera, who still work within these industries because it's something that they're passionate about. That's why it's really important to build community, build a network within this industry. You know, you need to know motion graphic designers. You need to know photographers if you're a videographer. If you're a photographer, you need to know videographers because all these things go hand in hand. You could have a massive project where you can bring a lot of these people on, and it's always great to have people you know, people you've worked with, your friends who are reliable that you can bring on. So I'm really blessed and privileged to have developed a really big community of creatives over the last 4 years who know how to do all these different things. So I'm never worrying about creating a pitch deck. I'm never worrying about producing a video. I can just focus on shooting the actual video. And again, you know, there's different aspects here that you might want to explore. You know, you don't necessarily have to be a videographer. You know, you could be a bunch of other things as well. Going off on a little bit of a tangent there, but tying it back to how to charge your client, I hope this sheet can help you think about more how you want to go about charging your client, whether it's more or less than what you originally anticipated. Again, you have to take into consideration your experience level, the opportunity. If the client is coming with you and saying, hey, we don't have any budget, but what do you want to shoot this? Think about who you're shooting with. If you're shooting with LeBron James, but you'll never be shooting on an unpaid project with LeBron James. But if it's LeBron James and you have the ability to shoot with him and create something cool, that project is going to open up a lot of doors. So, you know, don't ever, you know, it might hurt to say yes to a free project. You never know where it'll take you. The last thing that I did want to leave you with is, let's say someone hits you up for a project, you haven't had work in 3-4 weeks, there's no work on the horizon. It's a video that you don't want to do at all, it's just like a project you could care less about, charge more. You know, if they come with you and say, hey, we need this video done in a month, it's like, all right, well, I can charge you $20,000 for it. And if they say yes, all right, then you're $20,000 richer. But there's nothing worse than doing a video that you don't want to do and you're underpaid for it, because then you're just going to hate your life and it's going to make you resent this career path and it's going to make you resent just everything. And that's terrible energy to be putting out there. So that's the last thing that I wanted to leave you with. I know this was all over the place. I know, hopefully it did help. I know there's no concrete number, but take all these things into consideration. Use this sheet when sending out a estimate and a quote. If there's still any questions, if you want me to do a part 2, a part 3, a part 4, if you want this to be a series, leave it in the comments below. DM me on Instagram, again, at Saul Lopez. I respond to every single person, so reach out to me. It means a lot. But with that, stay safe out there, and I'll see you next week. Peace.
I might just hit it through. That's on my element. I like dark skins, love a melanin. Talk, pushing the tongue when I'm stepping in.